Yes, go live. It says setting up your meeting. Hello and welcome to Let's Talk with Parul. It's such a pleasure to be back over here. This is our first Let's Talk, which we are doing online. The first one on live online, that is. So it's such a pleasure to be back in the live zone once more, bringing you topics, bringing you conversations that really need to happen. Today's conversation is about the alarming need of creating and supporting a healthy mindset towards sex and sexuality for teenagers. The context is a recent boys' locker room incident, and obviously it's been a rude shock. And what else could it be when you have 14, 15-year-old boys rating girls, objectifying them, talking casually about rape? If parents are glad that this did not happen in their city, in their kind of circles with their children or any other similar self-placating idea, then here's another rude shock. This is happening everywhere, at every level, even with much with much younger children. So it is something we all need to sit up and take note of. Yes, it's a fact that sexual aggression is not new. It's been there for years. We've all faced it at some point of time. At its mildest, we would get, in a public space, we would get leered at, catcalled, brushed up against. But it ended there. We went back home, we were in a safe space, and it ended there. Even if in school we were talked about by others, it was always a rumor. It was barely said face to face, and it still isn't being said face to face, but it ended there. There's no such luck for the generation of today. It just doesn't end because the new stage for all of this toxicity is the virtual space. And we've just seen that with the boys' locker room incident. It goes much deeper than one incident, and we're not going to go into details of this particular incident, but of the mindset that needs to be corrected, and of a certain much, much deeper problem that lies in society, which we're all stakeholders in, especially because it's our children who are involved, and we're the ones who can make a change. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, to just understand what we can do as individuals to make that change. And our guests for today are going to be talking about different aspects of the same thing. So we have Nandini Rao. She's a women's rights trainer. She's a counselor as well as an author. She also has vast experience working on gender training. Suraj Pawar has been working in the development sector. Let me just get everybody on the screen. There we are. Suraj Pawar has been working in the development sector in various capacities, and he has experience working with young men and boys on the issues of gender, patriarchy, masculinities, among other things. And our youngest participant, Kanay Mathur, is 18 years old. He's just graduated from school. And he's the co-founder of Teens for Teens, a peer mentoring group that seeks to remove the stigma around mental health. And he's quite passionate about the kind of topics we're going to be talking about today. So welcome and thank you so much. Welcome Nandini, Suraj, Kanay. Thank you so much for joining us on Let's Talk with Parul. I will start with a question for you, Kanay. This boys' locker room incident definitely came as a shock, right, to all of us. And, you couldn't ever imagine teenagers talking like this. But we know for a fact that this is not the only group of its kind. This kind of talk is not new. This kind of talk is not something which is unique to, that particular group and that incident. So can you give us a ground reality of what things are actually like?
So what people don't realize is that the situation is actually much worse than what they say. So I just graduated from school, and it's not like there is one group of people that talks about things like these. Everyone in school, there are boys from 6th grade to boys in 12th grade. Everyone has discussions about these issues. And this problem starts really, really soon. Boys as young as 10, 11, everyone sexualizes girls, everyone objectifies others, and no one calls out this problem. And boys' locker room is just one group, but I personally know of more than 10, 15, maybe even 20 other groups that exist from people across schools, across cities. And I feel like it's really important that parents as well as kids, everyone understands the reality that this problem is all around us. We need to stop treating it as someone else's problem. And the reality is that kids as young as 10, 11, they no one's telling them what they're doing is wrong, so they continue doing these things. It starts really small. They start with objectifying, they start with making casual jokes, they start with using the word rape really casually, and that's what leads to incidents like boys locker room coming up.
But what do they understand at that age, at that very, very young age? Is it just hearsay? Is it stuff that they, hearing their seniors talk about, that they're just blindly repeating stupidly without understanding what it is? I'm just trying to figure out that, at such a young age, what is it that they even think they're talking about?
So I'd say it'd be two things. So one, popular culture media. So popular culture media, whether it's movies or it's games, they sexualize women and females so much that young boys have started believing that this is what life is like. They've started thinking that's okay. And then second, the thing you said about seniors, that's true too. So they see people that they respect, that they look up to, talking about these things, and no one calls anyone out. And I feel like it's a problem with parents, teachers. No one calls their sons out for using certain words, for saying certain things, because everyone thinks it's a joke. And the line between a joke and something that's actually harmful gets blurred very quickly.
You're right. It always starts as a joke. Nandini, we were talking about it the other day that, Ladki ko chhedna, that whole Bollywood has also glamorized that aspect. I know it's very complicated. There are so many reasons why this is happening. And I know there are many levels that we can go into, but just to understand a very, very broad sense, in a broad sense, why are boys so young talking in such a toxic manner? What is happening out there?
One of the things that is that what Kanay was saying is actually not something new, because I'm sure that boys have been talking about this since, they've always been talking about girls in a certain way, sexualizing them, etc. But I think the fact that it is on a medium in which, or on various media, which can get amplified, also makes it sound, I mean, it's also, it makes everyone so much more vulnerable. It makes girls extremely vulnerable because also of the media in which that they actually use. And the reasons why this is happening, it's the very casual nature of the body itself, right? You're looking at the girl's body in a very, within quotes, a casual way. And so you're sexualizing and you're objectifying because you're seeing everybody around you doing it, etc. You're watching the movies, etc. But it's more than the movies. It is also in your very immediate environment. There must be some triggering factor within your closer environment that is making you do that makes young boys do what young boys I'm talking about. As they grow older, there are other layers of influences also. But for the really young boys, I would say like the 10, the 11, you and it's not just family. I mean, family of course is a huge influence, but family ke saath saath, I think it's also your peer groups right around you. And I think it's that level, and everybody is kind of feeding into this, this object, this commodity, this sexual, the fact that a girl's body is just a sex object. It reinforces in young boys the fact that ha theek hai, this is what girls really are. So in a sense, it's that it's each one feeding into the other from the I would say also family, but I would say also community. And the community could be a school, it could be friends who you go out to play with in the playground, whatever your football teams or basketball teams or whatever, wherever you're playing. So it's also those, and so it's everybody around you. And I will come a little later, I will talk about the larger influences which help boys and men later who get that sense of impunity, but I'll talk about that later maybe.
Okay. सूरज, आपसे मेरा यही सवाल है कि मतलब आप जो नंदिनी कह रही थी, आप उसमें कुछ ऐड करना चाहेंगे? और खासकर आपसे एक चीज और पूछूंगी कि ये जो फीलिंग्स आती हैं, मतलब ये जो अग्रेशन है, ये मतलब आई एम जस्ट ट्राइंग टू आर्टिकुलेट इट प्रॉपर्ली, कि ये इसलिए आती क्योंकि बॉयज आर कंफ्यूज्ड कि अब कैसे बिहेव करना चाहिए. एकदम से उन्होंने इतनी प्रोग्रेसिव मैसेजिंग भी सुनी है, कई बार उनके अपने घरों में सुनी जाती है, उनको स्कूल में सिखाया जा रहा है, तो एक तरफ से तो वो मैसेजिंग आती है, और फिर peers के साथ बैठ के they start feeling something else. तो ये जो aggression है, ये this feeling of impunity that Nandini was just talking about, which we will go into in greater depth, ये क्या कुछ confusion create कर रहा है? Do they just not know how to behave?
जी देखिए, ये बहुत अलग अलग लेवल पे देखने वाली चीज है. एक तो सबसे पहले जिस तरीके का सोशलाइजेशन होता है घरों में, स्कूलों में या पीयर ग्रुप में, तो उसका भी एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर होता है जिस तरीके से ये लड़के मतलब सो टू से कि इस तरीके से क्यों बिहेव कर रहे हैं. और एक जो फैक्टर है, मतलब इसको एनालाइज करने का और एक जो लेंस है, वो मैस्कुलिनिटी का है कि मर्दानगी के जो झूठी संकल्पना है और परिभाषा है समाज में जिस तरीके से गढ़ी गई है, उस हिसाब से भी असली मर्द की छवि को प्रोजेक्ट करने के लिए भी लड़के इस तरीके के जो इमेजेस है या दबंग टाइप का बनने की जो कोशिशें हैं, उस मतलब उस जरिए भी ये सारी चीजें वो परफॉर्म करने की कोशिश करते हैं, जिसमें रिस्क इन्वॉल्व होता है, वायलेंस इन्वॉल्व होता है, और स्पेसिफिकली सेक्सुअल कंट्रोल, सेक्सुअल परफॉर्मेंस के थ्रू वो दिखाना चाहते हैं कि उनके असली मर्द, रियल मैन की छवि क्या है. और रही बात सोशलाइजेशन की, तो जैसे नंदिनी बोल रही थी कि ये हम फैमिली, स्कूल, पीयर, ये सारे तो एक इंस्टीट्यूशंस है बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट जिससे हम सोशलाइज होते हैं. फैमिली से रिलेटेड मतलब अभी ये जैसे आप देखोगे कि ये लॉकर रूम वाला जो एक वर्चुअल मीडियम में हुआ, मुझे लगता है कहीं ना कहीं कम ज्यादा तरीके से मजाक में या इस तरीके से रेसिस्ट, बॉडी शेमिंग वगैरह ये हमारे फैमिली व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप्स में भी होता है. जिस तरीके के काले सावले दिखने वाले जो लोग हैं, उनके डांस करते हुए वीडियोज, उनका मजाक उड़ाना, या फिर ब्लैक अफ्रीकन वुमेन को दिखाते हुए एडमिन से तो शादी मैं ही करूंगी, कि इस तरीके के जो पोस्ट है, ये बहुत छोटी छोटी फंडामेंटल चीजें हैं जो जिसके लिए एक वर्चुअल मीडियम एक्सेप्टेंस लेवल को ध्यान में रखते हुए हमारे इर्द गिर्द ही ये होता रहता है. और यही आपको फिर बड़े पैमाने पे इसका और खराब स्वरूप और हिंसक स्वरूप जो है वो आपको ये बॉयज लॉकर रूम के जैसे दिखाई देगा. जी,
That's so right. अब यही सारे jokes, all these, there are objectifying jokes and videos and songs which we all circulate on WhatsApp, and yeah, starts from there. Kanay, my next question to you is essentially to do with peer pressure. That obviously a lot of you feel badly about this. You know that there is something wrong. I think the very fact that the boys' locker room is an online hidden room where you're not saying things face to face to the girls is symbolic of the fact that like the boys knew that there is something wrong in that kind of talk and in that kind of, objectification. Why isn't anyone standing up? Why isn't another boy or another girl also? I would say there are lots of girls in the group as well. Why isn't anyone standing up and saying this is wrong? And it all stems back to, of course, what Suraj is saying कि हम अपने WhatsApp groups में नहीं बोल पाते हैं. तो ये तो मतलब कि youngsters हैं. But just to get a sense of what is happening in the peer groups between these 12 to 15 to 16-year-old children, boys and girls, what kind of conversations are happening if somebody tries to say this is wrong?
So, like Sir said, I feel like toxic masculinity is a huge problem when it comes to boys. So when they see something that's happening that's wrong, but they think that it's something they have to do to prove their masculinity, they're scared to call it out. Because I know of people who've called out sexist behavior, and the response they hear from other boys is that, are you gay? How come you don't support this behavior? They use this really derogatory words like faggot, and they demonize the boy for calling out what's wrong. So peer pressure plays a huge part because everyone wants to fit in. So like during the ages of 10 to 15, 16, everyone's trying to find their place. Everyone's trying to fit in. So no one wants to go against what's the norm. And the norm that's already been established is that boys have to show that they're masculine. And the only way they do this is by sexualizing other girls, by engaging in sexist behavior, by bringing other girls down. And they're too scared. Not every individual, a lot of people know that it's wrong, but they're too scared to call it out because then they'll be ostracized. They won't fit in. Like even the people that called out the boys' locker room incident, they're being bullied so much. All those people are being bullied to no extent. So this is just scaring a lot of other people as well to call out these incidents in the future. And another problem is that a lot of people think that, my friends are just joking. so it's okay. They look at the outside and they see other groups and they think, yeah, that's a problem. But when it comes to me or when it comes to the people around me, we know what the limit is and we're just joking, and that's why we don't want to call it out and ruin the fun. No one wants to be the person that ruins the fun.
No one wants
So
to
I think that's
party
the problem. They really want to fit in.
something as small as on all of your Instagram posts, right from the time when you're very young, a nice picture means comments like, oh, so hot, so sexy. What business do we have writing sexy and hot for a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old? I mean, it's basically, and I know when I've questioned various kids of your age and younger about this, they say, oh, it's just for fun. So I don't know where, the words have lost their meaning, have lost the kind of context that we knew it in. Has vocabulary changed, or have perspectives changed? Nandini, I'm going to ask you to weigh in on this one, and then I have a more specific question for you.
Okay, I'm trying to think, has vocabulary changed? I was laughing at that because I mean, I do workshops on sexual harassment workplace, and when we talk, and even these are for adults, right? And when we are talking about, you have a colleague who comes in and she's looking really good, so and then a lot of times in the workshops, men will get a little defensive and they'll say, so we cannot compliment our colleagues anymore.
Yeah.
So then, then sometimes there's an exchange where maybe one of the women participants will say, अच्छा तो आप बताइए कि आपके लिए compliment क्या है? तो मतलब हम कह सकते हैं ना कि आप sexy लग रही हो. And there's an immediate reaction to this. These are colleagues. I mean, and these are classmates that Kanay is talking about, and I'm talking about colleagues who are at workplaces. So, and then I mean, usually one of the things that we try to keep in mind while talking about any kind of sexual violence, sexual abuse of any kind, is this crossing of boundaries. And having an understanding, एक तो you understand कि मेरे खुद के क्या boundaries हैं, so you understand it for yourself, and then also understand that other people may have different kinds of boundaries. And when you start crossing over, whether you're 12 years old or you're, I don't know, 25 years old, it really doesn't matter, because if you've crossed that line into somebody else's boundary, into somebody, मतलब हम कहते हैं कि वो दायरे को अपने पार करा, then that is when you start making the other person extremely uncomfortable. And there are times also, there are instances, I mean, many of us know this, many of us have been part of it, jahan pe you want to be complimented. You want people to say, oh, you're looking really hot, or you're a woman, right? You're looking really hot. I'm sure girls also, it's the same thing. You're looking really sexy. It's not that you don't, but then the boundary of those who do not want to be called that, who feel sexualized when someone says you are looking sexy, and to have the maturity to understand कि boundaries cross करने में भी दिक्कत है. There is a question of consent, and in all of this conversation in Boys Locker Room, I mean, thanks Kanay for saying that there are some 20 other groups out there. It's really freaking me out just listening to you saying it. But the fact is that the question of consent is something that boys, whoever they are talking on all these groups, need to really, really understand and internalize the concept of consent, and understanding that is this something that the other person, क्या वो चाहती है कि आप इसके बारे में ऐसे बात करो? It's as simple as that. So you have your boundaries, you have your consent, your notions of consent. So yeah, so that's what's making me so uncomfortable, is you're not even thinking about the other person as a person. It's just a person with body parts, which is why morphing भी यही होता है ना, you morph parts onto a body. So it doesn't matter who the person is. The person is gone completely. It's not a person anymore. She's not a person anymore. So that is really difficult to kind of...
You're right. That's just absolute frightening idea. My specific question to you, Nandini, was more to do with this confusion that I broached right now with Suraj, that, agar boys confused hain, अपने sexuality, अपने adolescence को लेकर, अपने changes को लेकर, तो girls भी तो confused हैं. They're also, trying to explore their sexuality. And the point that I remember discussing with you earlier was that when they are doing that, or even trying to explore or maybe celebrate it in a certain way, they are the ones who are being called out and victimized and slut shamed. So how do we deal with that? I mean, how much restriction do I put on my children? As it is, I've stopped them from going out on the streets. I've stopped them from wearing a certain type of, certain type of clothes. अब मैं ये भी बंद करूं कि आप सोशल स्पेस पे जा नहीं सकते, या जा रहे हो तो आप ध्यान से जाओ, ये देखो लेफ्ट राइट, कपड़े मत पहनो, ऐसे पिक्चर्स मत अपलोड करो. रिस्ट्रिक्शन सिर्फ गर्ल्स पे बढ़ती जा रही है. I'm just, that frightens me as well.
See, that's why we say, and I know that Suraj is very much part of this world, जहाँ पे हम लोग sexuality के बारे में sexuality education के बारे में बात करते हैं. How important it is to understand that sexuality is not just sex in the way, and it could be you're imagining it to be in a certain way. क्योंकि उस in many, I wouldn't say in that age, but definitely it probably begins at a certain age. But then, people are fantasizing about sex till, I don't know, they're 70 years old probably or more. But the point, and the point is that, but to start talking about sexuality education is so important, because it is not just sexualizing somebody, but it is also you are walking into somebody else's space without realizing that they themselves have thoughts and feelings and and their own notions of sexuality. And you're right, it's always, we're always so angry, we're always railing against the fact कि औरतों के लिए सबसे ज्यादा restrictions क्यों होते हैं, सारे बंधन सारे सिर्फ औरतों के लिए, सिर्फ लड़कियों के लिए. And it's completely unfair that when you find when there is a space where you think you have the freedom to express yourself fairly safely, because it's not a face-to-face encounter, वो space भी छीनी जा रही है. और उस space में भी I am not able to express myself. I'm self-censoring, or I'm forced to self-censor at the same time. But this conversation, I feel, is so important to have with boys. Restrictions for girls, तो हमने मतलब सदियों से हम उसी के बारे में बात करें. But what about restrictions for boys? Restrictions on their thoughts, on their feelings, on being able to deal with those feelings maturely. Because I don't think all 11-year-old boys or all 10-year-old boys are all doing this. They're not. So what is it that some of them, why is it that some of them are not doing it? I think it's important also to understand that. अपने आप को कैसे आप restrict करोगे at whatever age you are as a man in this very masculinist world to start.
Right. Suraj,
I just like to add something to that.
Sure, Kanay, go ahead.
So, like ma'am said, I feel like even now, even after all these incidents have taken place, all of my female friends have had to sit down with their parents. They've been told what to do differently. They've been talked to. None of the boys have been talked to. It's like all of these incidents happen. You talk to the girls, you tell the girls what to do, but you expect that my son was not involved, so I'm not going to talk to the boys. There's nothing that's being said to the boys. There needs to be more discussion with the boys to tell them that they also need to, like, all the restrictions are being placed on the girls, which is really unfair.
Thank you for saying that. That it really makes a difference when someone of your age and your gender especially speaks up and says something like that, I want to be told as well. Maybe there is something that I haven't understood. सूरज, ये अब आपके पास आती है कॉन्वर्सेशन इसी बारे में कि सेक्स एजुकेशन स्कूलों में तो चल ही रहा है. मोस्टली सेफ्टी के बारे में, गुड टच बैड टच, हमने जो भी शुरू किया था वो बड़ी कंफर्टेबल सी डिस्कशन हो गई थी. काफी पेरेंट्स मतलब अब इतने ऑकवर्ड नहीं फील करते हैं वो वाली कॉन्वर्सेशंस लाने में. लेकिन उसके बियॉन्ड कुछ गया ही नहीं है. हम सिर्फ बहुत ही बायोलॉजी के बारे में बात करते हैं. अगर सेक्स एजुकेशन की बात होती भी है स्कूल में तो बहुत ही बायोलॉजिकल टर्म्स में होती है, टेक्स्ट बुक टाइप में ऑकवर्ड रहती है. तो किस तरह से रीडिफाइन करना होगा अब सेक्स एजुकेशन को? अब तो करना ही पड़ेगा मेरे ख्याल से. अब हर स्कूल को, हर इंस्टीट्यूशन को, पेरेंट्स को, हम लोग सबको ये फैक्ट फेस करना होगा कि sex education has to be redefined as a more positive sexuality, gender. I don't know what term to use, but please help us in that. आपको क्या लगता है क्या करना चाहिए अब?
अभी ये बहुत कॉम्प्लेक्स इशू है, मतलब मैं अभी इसमें क्या ही मदद करूंगा. बट एक मुद्दा मुझे जरूर यहाँ पे रजिस्टर करना है. इसको ना बहुत अलग अलग, बहुत कॉम्प्लेक्स है ये, और इसको बहुत अलग अलग एंगल है. इसको क्लास का एंगल है, कास्ट और रिलीजन के एंगल हो सकते हैं. अब इस बॉयज लॉकर रूम के घटना में आप अगर देखेंगे तो इसमें क्लास एंगल बहुत क्लियर है. वो इस तरीके के इलिट क्लास के लड़के हैं जिनके स्कूलों में सेक्सुअलिटी सेक्स एजुकेशन ऑलरेडी चल रहा है। मतलब कुछ कुछ स्कूलों में बॉयज की ये डिमांड थी कि पोर्नोग्राफी के ऊपर कुछ कोर्सेस इंट्रोड्यूस हो सकते हैं क्या उनके स्कूलों में। तो ये एक बहुत ही एलिट क्लास के बॉयज थे और इनके यहाँ पे ऑलरेडी सेक्स और सेक्सुअलिटी एजुकेशन चल ही रहे थे इन स्कूलों में। लेकिन इम्पोर्टेंट पार्ट इसको और जो जोड़ने की जरूरत है, जो नंदिनी कह रही थी कि रिस्ट्रिक्शन और कंसेंट, ये जो चीजें हैं इसको आप, क्योंकि जब तक आप ये पैट्रियार्कल जो थॉट है, एक पितृसत्तात्मक सोच, उसको भी आप अगर इससे नहीं जोड़ेंगे तो सिर्फ सेक्सुअलिटी के इंफॉर्मेटिव एजुकेशन से बहुत सी चीजें नहीं शायद बदलेंगी। मतलब उससे एक अवेयरनेस आ सकता है, लेकिन हालांकि अभी हम देख रहे हैं कि जिन स्कूलों में ये एजुकेशन चल रही थी वहां पे भी ये समस्या है। तो इसको थोड़ा और पावर के एंगल से, मतलब और पितृसत्तात्मक सोच के एंगल से, आपकी एजेंसीज कैसे काम करती है, आपके पास में कितने सोर्सेस है पावर के, आप कितने एजुकेटेड हो, पैसा कितना है आपके पास में, आप कौन से कास्ट क्लास रीजन रिलीजन से बिलोंग करते हो, आपको कब ये लगता है कि आप यहाँ पे ये सारी चीजें कर सकते हो। तो ये ऐसे सारे मुद्दों के बारे में सोचना होगा और ये कई स्तर पे मतलब काम करने की जरूरत है। एक तो हम अपने खुद के जो सबसे इमीडिएट इंस्टीट्यूशन है फैमिली, उससे स्टार्ट कर सकते हैं। और इम्पोर्टेंटली इस ऐसे केसेस में फैमिली और स्कूल में कोई लड़कों को बिठा के नहीं सिखा रहे कि आपको लॉकर रूम में क्या बातें करनी है, गैंग रेप के बारे में आपके ये सोशल नॉर्म्स होने चाहिए। लेकिन पीयर का जो प्रेशर है, जैसे कन्हैया ने बोला था, वो भी बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट रोल प्ले करता है। साथ ही साथ में आपको मीडिया एजेंसीज, फिल्में, एडवर्टीजमेंट, इनके साथ में काम करना होगा। ऐसी पिक्चरें जो बलात्कार के ऊपर जोक्स बना बना के 5-5 मिनट का लाफ्टर लेती है, वो वो सीन जब तक चलते रहेंगे तो शायद मतलब ये परिस्थितियां बदलना बहुत मुश्किल होता जाएगा। इसके लिए सोचना पड़ेगा। मतलब ये काफी कॉम्प्लेक्स है, मेरे पास में ऐसा कोई
नहीं, ऑफ
क्लिक
कोर्स
आंसर नहीं है।
इंस्टेंट आंसर तो मेरे ख्याल से अभी किसी के पास भी नहीं है। तो ऑफ कोर्स आई पुट यू एट अ स्पॉट, बट आई जस्ट वांटेड टू अंडरस्टैंड कि मतलब ये जो हम लोग अभी जो इनइफेक्टिव सेक्स एजुकेशन है, इसको कैसे बदलना है। नंदिनी, आई मीन perhaps you'll have some perspectives for the parents at least, as a mother of a boy yourself. What are you going to, what have you been telling him? What did you tell him after the this locker room incident? What are you telling him every few days about the world that he's living in?
Yeah. So this conversation for me, my son is an adult now. So these are conversations I had with him as he was growing up.
Right.
And one of the things that I remember that we would discuss in great, with बहुत गंभीरता से, कि there's the notion of responsibility. कि इतना आसान है एक लड़का होने से कि you can get away with anything you want, right? कुछ भी हो, आई डोंट नो, सेक्स किसी के साथ तुमने करा और किसी लड़की के साथ तुमने करा और वो प्रेग्नेंट हो गई, वो तुम्हारा प्रॉब्लम नहीं रहा, वो उसका प्रॉब्लम रहा, whether she wants to keep the baby, have an abortion, whatever. So the one of the things that we would emphasize over and over again was this whole notion of responsibility, कि अपने लिए तुम वो जिम्मेदारी लो. Understand that as a boy, because of this exactly what सूरज ने अभी जो कहा कि पेट्रियार्कल इतना ये समाज है कि तुम्हारे लिए तो छूट तो हर वक्त ही रहता है, but don't take advantage of that. Be responsible in any kind of relationships that you are in. I mean, it doesn't have to be only sexual relationships. I mean, according to me, I would wonder, the groups that Kanay was talking about, I wonder कि क्या ये तो सिर्फ बॉयफ्रेंड गर्लफ्रेंड वाले ग्रुप्स के बारे में नहीं बात कर रहे. पीपल आर टॉकिंग अबाउट क्लासमेट्स एंड फ्रेंड्स एंड व्हाटएवर. So the thing is कि it's not only sexual relationships, but in any relationships, a notion of responsibility. एक बात है, respect करो यार. Respect, it's such an old fashioned word लगता है, but respect and किसी को एक dignity के साथ देखना, which we find it so. जितने बार हम लोग काम करते हैं इन चीजों को लेके या जूझते हैं इन चीजों को लेके, वो इतनी बार ये शब्द बोलना ही कम रहता है. To talk about how you respect your partner, how you respect your friends, how you respect your colleagues, So it's that circle that keeps widening. It doesn't mean कि you have to know that person इसलिए उसके बारे में तुम ऐसे बात कर रहे हो. It does not happen. And I think the problem is that in this patriarchal world that we live in, problem is कि ये इतना broad मतलब इतनी इतनी व्यापक चीजें चल रही हैं, इतनी जगहों से हमें ये सुनाई देता है that this whole impunity, when you have people in positions of power, political power, who talk about women as if they mean nothing, and I'm going to cite a specific example of Kashmir here. When Kashmir happened in August, when the abrogation happened in August, and we had people in positions of power talking about Kashmiri women as if they were objects, right? कि कश्मीरी औरतों के साथ अब हम ये कर सकते हैं, वो कर सकते हैं. I mean, you may be 11 and 10 and 11 and not bothered about Kashmir, that's fine. But you may be 17, 18, 19, 20 and you're listening to all of this and hearing कि इनके बारे में चाहे हम कुछ भी बोलें, तो मैं अपने मेरे बगल में जो बैठी है मेरी क्लासमेट, उसके बारे में क्यों ना बोलूं? You're going to get away with it. And I think one of the conversations as a parent, I've always found it, and I don't say it's any less important at any age, is कि तुम अपने ही actions के लिए responsibility लो, understand what consent is and ask for consent. And consent is each time, every time. Consent is not कि एक बार किसी ने हाँ कहा, इसका मतलब एक फोटो पे तुमने हाँ कहा. फॉर एग्जांपल जो पारुल आप बोल रही थी कि एक फोटो पे आपने कहा कि हाँ, किसी ने कहा कि you're looking sexy and that didn't get a reaction. It may not be that every single time. So that notion of consent of once does not mean every single time. Yeah, when you say yes, it is yes. When you say no, it is no. उसके नाम में हाँ is just for the Hindi films. उसके नाम में हाँ वाली बात जो है, जब वो जहन में वो बात बैठ जाती है, तब वो बहुत बड़ा खतरनाक हो सकता है. Because if a girl turns around to one of her classmates and say, I think what you guys were discussing on that is absolutely horrifying, they may say कि हाँ तो तुम्हारे नाम में तो हाँ ही है. So you cannot do that. You have to understand. So in sexuality education, I don't know, there are so many kinds of education and so many kinds of ways in which these conversations happen. But when you talk about questions of consent, when you talk about these of agency, I mean, Suraj used the word agency. It sounds like a tough word, but it's actually really simple. And when we talk about all these issues, that is when we are talking about a well-rounded comprehensive sexuality education is what we call it in our terms, but thoda well-rounded sexual discussions around sex and sexuality and sexual feelings and responsibility and vagara. And this is extremely important. It cannot be brushed aside under the carpet anymore. But I'm saying कि कभी ऐसे नहीं हुआ था, कभी भी ऐसे कोई समय नहीं था जब हम ये कर सकते थे, but now it's really imperative when you know that these kinds of toxic conversations are happening, तो उसको कैसे रोका जा सकता.
Absolutely. Kanay, you're getting a lot of compliments from the viewers. Everybody's very happy that I think it's just basically, you are representing the generation we want to see. We want to believe our children are, of the kind of mindset that you are demonstrating right now. We have a pointed question for you. Usha would love to know how you interact with your peer group and how do they respond. Let's talk about, this particular case, the boys' locker room. What are the conversations that you personally have had with your peer group, and really what has Teens, for example, responded with?
So the conversations were not easy, and it was very different with different types of people. So I talked to, again, I'm going to set it differently for my female friends and my male friends, because there was a stark difference in the responses I got. So the day after the entire boys' locker room happened, I have many friends who felt scared for their safety. I know people who deleted their social media. I know people who were scared for their siblings. And Teens for Teens got messages from hundreds of people that were panicking, that didn't know what to do because they were scared. They were asking us if they should delete their pictures, if they should, just go off social media. That's the reaction that girls had. With boys, it was split. So everyone recognized that it was wrong, but the problem is that they only recognized that this extreme incident was wrong. What they didn't understand that was that they too are propagating this entire behavior, that even something as simple as saying something like women belong in the kitchen, which is a joke that people my age find so funny for some reason. They continuously go on with these jokes, which is why, and they think that these are just jokes. They don't realize that this is what's promoting the sexist narrative. This is what's promoting the patriarchy, that men are superior, that women are just our objects, that they don't really hold any value. And this is what leads to things like boys' locker room. So it's a difficult conversation to have, because I talk to a lot of people about this, about how these jokes are not okay. And the response is that, you are not being a fun person. We're making these jokes in front of our friends and it's okay because we're just joking, and we're not going to be the type of people that are in boys' locker room. So that was the problem with the conversations, because people didn't understand that even if they themselves are not involved, by making these jokes, they're promoting a narrative, they're creating an environment that promotes this entire narrative.
That's just it. That's exactly what Nandini also just spoke about, कि वो that thin line one has to recognize, वो जो दायरा है जिसकी नंदिनी अभी बात कर रही थी. How do we get our kids to recognize that? We just actually we do have a little bit of time to just get some closing thoughts from all of you. So सूरज, आपके साथ शुरू करेंगे. मतलब फाइनली जो टेक अवे है पेरेंट्स के लिए आपकी तरफ से वो क्या होगा, कि आप क्या चाहते हैं? अब आज जाके हम घर पे, जब मतलब घर पे तो खैर है ही हम लोग, लेकिन जब बच्चों को बुलाएंगे, उनके साथ बैठेंगे, तो हम क्या बात करें?
जी, सबसे पहले तो ये जो सेक्स और सेक्सुअलिटी से इर्द गिर्द जो शर्म जुड़ी हुई है, तो वो हट जाए, उसको छुपाने की कोशिश ना की जाए. एज अ पेरेंट आप जितने भी फ्रेंडली आपके रिलेशन हो, उस तरीके से आप बातचीत करें. स्पेसिफिकली मैं यहाँ मेंशन करना चाहूंगा कि सोशलाइजेशन की जिम्मेदारी सिर्फ माओ की ना रह जाए. वो सिर्फ उन्होंने ही अपने बच्चों को, लड़कियों को, लड़कों को संवारना है, समझाना है, उनका सोशलाइजेशन करना, ये ना हो. पापाओं की भी जिम्मेदारी बनती है कि उन्होंने अपने बच्चों के साथ में कॉन्वर्सेशन, उनके लालन पालन में भी उनका सहभाग हो. मेल टीचर्स जो है उनकी भी जिम्मेदारी बनती है स्कूलों में. ये कुछ प्राइमरी इंस्टीट्यूशन है जो हमारे इर्द गिर्द है. और खास करके लड़कों को मैं अपील करना चाहूंगा कि मर्दानगी की झूठी संकल्पनाओं को बढ़ावा ना दें, और अपने पीयर्स में भी ये कोशिश करें कि इस तरीके के सोशल नॉर्म आप प्रमोट करें, तैयार करें अपने आप में, दोस्तों में भी, जिससे एक दूसरे को रिस्पेक्ट, और खास तौर से महिलाएं और लड़कियों की रिस्पेक्ट हो, उनके दायरे, उनके कंसेंट की बात की जाए. और ये पीयर ग्रुप अगर पीयर प्रेशर में इस हद तक की टॉक्सिक चीजें कर सकते हैं, तो कुछ अच्छाई के लिए या फिर कुछ जो इस तरीके के जेंडर इक्वल नॉर्म्स है वो एस्टैब्लिश करने के लिए भी वो डेफिनेटली कंट्रीब्यूट कर सकते हैं. तो पीयर्स के भी इसमें अपने दोस्तों के प्रति जिम्मेदारी है कि अपनी दोस्तियां और ज्यादा मतलब संवारे उसको पॉजिटिव वे में. जी जी,
बिल्कुल सही कहा आपने. एंड थैंक यू. स्पेशली ये प्लेटफॉर्म मदर्स का है और मेरे ख्याल से हर मदर की तरफ से आपको एक स्पेशल थैंक यू जाएगा कि आपने कहा है कि सारी जिम्मेदारी माओं की नहीं है. यू नो, कई बार होता है कि हम वो पूरी जिम्मेदारी अपने आप पे लेते हैं कि और कौन करेगा, हम ही तो करेंगे. So thank you for saying that. Thank you for bringing that out specifically. Yes, fathers have to be a part of it. The male teachers have to be a part of it. It has to be a joint effort by everyone.
जी.
Nandini, please, let's have some final words from you as well.
I want to say that being cool, है ना, जहाँ पे Kanay, where you started from this whole concept of, it's cool to do this, it's cool to do that, right? That's the notion that many boys may have. I would say think a little bit more about what is really cool. What is it cool to talk about somebody in a certain, to slut shame somebody, and in slut shame itself, you may not think of it as slut shaming, but speaking about somebody in a negative, in a derogatory fashion, about her gender, about her body, about her, and it is the larger picture that Suraj also had pointed out in terms of somebody's caste, class, religion. So when you start, these jokes, so-called jokes, are not jokes anymore. जो हम वो शब्द इस्तेमाल करते करते थे छेड़खानी या eve teasing. We don't say those words anymore. It is not eve tease, it's not teasing in the first place. When you तुम इतनी चोट तुम पहुंचा रहे हो किसी को, you're actually wounding somebody's dignity by speaking about them in a certain way. I would say boys who are capable of doing so much good in the world also can rethink their own roles, can rethink their own behaviors. They don't have to be cool in that kind of way, which is pulling somebody else down. There are thousand ways to be cool and to be that, to be, I don't know, whatever it is that one wants at that age, to be popular, etc., etc. And also at the same time to understand, and also to my last word for mothers, because of the platform that this is that have those conversations with your kids, have those conversations with your sons firstly, and with your daughters. And when we talk about restrictions, it's also good to reflect back on the restrictions we faced growing up, just on the basis of gender, and try and understand how can we make our own girls, how can we make them more independent and more capable of handling the world as it is, as it's panning out before us. So that was what I would say. And for boys, definitely have these conversations with your sons about how they need to change their mindsets, if this is the kind of mindset that is being promoted by themselves and their friends, because it's easy to say peers, but you are also part of that peer group. So
Kanay, I don't see your video on. Are you still in the discussion? We'll try and get Kanay back. But in the meantime, I have a question. Subhaprata wants to know, and I'm sure lots of moms want to know, when do you think we should start this conversation? At what age? So we've been told that safety conversations, good touch, bad touch, start at 3, 4, age appropriate way, keep increasing it. Consent, respect, that when does that start? I mean, should it always be there, or is there a certain time when we can make it more specific? I'd like both of you, Suraj and Nandini, both of you to answer this question. सूरज आप बताइए
ओके मुझे लगता है कि इसकी कोई पर्टिकुलर उम्र नहीं होती है। जब भी बच्चों को सवाल हो, उसमें बच्चों को समझने वाली भाषाओं में आंसर करना चाहिए। हालांकि पेरेंटिंग या सोशलाइजेशन के मामले में मेरा अनुभव कुछ है नहीं है, बट मुझे लगता है कि जब भी जिस भी उम्र में ये सवाल हो, इसके लिए मुझे याद है एक सीरीज देख रहा था मैं, सेक्स चैट विद पप्पू एंड पापा, यूट्यूब पे ऑनलाइन है वाई फिल्म्स का ना। तो उसमें एक छोटा बच्चा अपने पापा से सवाल पूछता है, तो पापा बच्चे को समझने वाले भाषा में उसको आंसर करने की कोशिश करते हैं। मतलब आई एम नॉट सेइंग कि वो बेस्ट तरीके होंगे या फिर वो बेस्ट ऑडियो विजुअल मटेरियल है, बट एक अच्छा प्रयास है जिसमें उन्होंने छोटे बच्चे के भी जो सवाल है सेक्स एंड सेक्सुअलिटी को लेके उसको आंसर करने की कोशिश की है। तो इस तरीके से पेरेंट्स को भी, मम्मी पापा को भी अभी क्रिएटिव होना पड़ेगा। मतलब उसके लिए और विदाउट मतलब उसको छुपा के या उसको साइडलाइन ना करते हुए उन मुद्दों को एड्रेस करना होगा। मतलब प्राइवेट पार्ट या कुछ भी आपके जनरेशन में जिस तरीके के नॉमेनक्लेचर इस्तेमाल किए जाते थे बॉडी पार्ट्स के लिए, आप वही पास ऑन ना करें बच्चों को। आप बच्चों को समझने वाली भाषा में आप उनको ये करें, और उम्र कोई ऐसा है नहीं है कि छोटा या बड़ा।
बिल्कुल। नंदिनी, do you want to add to that?
Absolutely agree with सूरज। ऐसी कोई उम्र ही नहीं है जहाँ पे हमें बात नहीं करना चाहिए, जैसे भी सवाल आए। Absolutely agree with him. And a simple example to give is talking about menstruation, for example. And menstruation, again, it's not only talking with girls about menstruation, but talking with boys about menstruation. है ना? So I'm saying turn it around on its head. When people say कि अरे ये ad क्या है, and say नहीं वो कुछ नहीं है, whatever, for a sanitary pad ad, for example, and you say नहीं ये कुछ नहीं है, instead of that, start a conversation, make it absolutely age appropriate. I mean, there's every way I agree with what Suraj says कि वो शब्द आप चेंज कर सकते हो, आप तरीके बदल सकते हो, बात करने के तरीके बदल सकते हो, but answer the question Because if your child has asked you the question, they want to know what it means.
Right.
And by brushing them aside, they're just going to go look for the answers. Anyway, they're going to go look for the answers. And वो कहाँ से वो ढूंढ लाए, जब वो सेक्स के बारे में कुछ पूछेंगे और आप शर्मा जाओगे कि अरे इसके साथ हम सेक्स के बारे में कैसे बात करेंगे, वो जाएंगे कहीं और पे ढूंढेंगे वो उन सवालों के जवाब. And it's far safer for you to have those first initial, maybe not the first, but at least initial conversations yourself. And जितने छोटे हैं वहां से शुरू करो तो it's perfect. It will be just right.
Kanay, we're going to have you close. We had you start today's session, and you're also going to give us the final words in for this particular topic. The questions are zillions, of course. They're pouring in on the feed as well. And I have many in my mind. I would like this discussion to go on forever. But for now, we will take it up again at a different level, different aspect and all that. I want to ask you, forget the parents. I think the parents, we do know where to start with. But what would your message be to your peers on, this whole bystander, intervention, I would say, or whatever, for anyone who is watching something going wrong in front of them? How did you handle it? And what would you recommend to others as to how they can actually speak up about it and get over that fear of being ostracized or of being singled out?
So I feel like there are two things that are important for this. The first thing ma'am had already mentioned, which is responsibility. So I feel like it's really important for everyone my age, for all teenagers, to understand what they're responsible for. So if they're making a joke, they need to understand that they're responsible for things like boys' locker room happening later. You need to understand that every action you're undertaking, every time you're standing, you're looking by, you're not calling someone out, you are responsible for something much bigger happening. You might think that one joke is not harming someone, but you have to understand what that leads to. So you have to understand that you are responsible for something much bigger happening. Second, when it comes to peer pressure and that entire notion of not feeling cool and being called out by your friends. So I also used to go through this. So 6th, 7th, 8th grade, I didn't really call these jokes out. I thought it's better to fit in. But what I realized on a personal level, and what I think is what everyone needs to realize at a point, is that if you have friends who think that these jokes are okay and they're going to call you out for these jokes, then you don't need to be a part of that peer group. Yes, they might ostracize you. Yes, they might not want to be friends with you. But this is a fact that there are people that really, really, that there are better people you can be friends with. So honestly, choosing your friend groups, and if someone pushes you out of their friend group because you're calling out something that's wrong, then I don't think you should want to be a part of that friend group. Yes, it'll be difficult to find new friends maybe, but stand for what you believe in and don't be a bystander, because then you're as responsible. You will find friends and all of that will not be a problem, but don't do something that's wrong. Stand for what your beliefs are.
Wow. Very well said, Kanay. I think this point that you made, sorry, I think we've lost a little bit of audio. Kanay, could you repeat that, please? You were saying something.
Sorry?
I think we lost the last part of what you were saying. If you could just repeat that.
I was just talking about how, don't be a bystander and let something that you know that is wrong happen just because you want to be friends with someone, because you will find friendship, you will find those things will not be a problem. But when you're contributing to something as heinous as, say, boys' locker room, or even worse, then you're never going to get over the guilt of that, because you know that's wrong. I know a lot of people know that it's wrong. It's just that they don't act on it, and it's time that we actually start acting on it.
That's very well said. I think that's, the point that you made, that if you feel there's something wrong and your peer group is pressurizing you, that's not the group for you. I think that's also a very bold thing to do. It's not easy for a child who's just about made friends and is happy in their comfort zone or whatever. So I hope that, they can find the strength to do that, especially when there is something going as horribly wrong as the boys' locker room. So thank you so much, Kanay. Thank you for your views, and thank you for all your action. Thank you for the mentoring that you do with the group, all the good things that you're doing. Really, thank you so much for that. Nandini and Suraj, thank you so much once again. And it's been a pleasure to hear your views. And, there are a few points which sometimes just need to be articulated and put forth. And you've done that for us so nicely. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks to you, Parul, and thanks to Mom's Press also for inviting me to this conversation. Thanks
Thank
to
you so
Kanak
much,
and
and to
Nandini.
our audience. Also, I'm sure there are lots of points that you want to discuss further. Please put them down in the chat here, right in the comments below. Join the group Let's Talk with Parul. We can take this discussion there further. And if you have questions, we'll try and get our panel to answer them. If you feel that there are some topics, some more aspects that we need to take up in the next discussion, please put that down. We would love to do that. We would love to get more and more clarity on this issue, clarity for us as parents as to how to proceed. Thank you so much for watching.
Thanks, Parul.